Welcome to the Brothers in Media with the Bros Who Know, Scott and Craig Colby. Who picks the stories that end up in the newspaper or on a newscast or on a website? For the most part, it is a mythical creature known as an assignment editor. This strange beast must know everything that's going on, how important everything is, and manage resources to cover the most demanding stories, and most importantly, never make a mistake. So how does an assignment editor know which stories to pick? We're going to tell you, but we're going to start, as always, helping on this journey is Scott Colby, my brother. He is a journalist with 36 years of experience as a reporter, columnist, editor, photographer, and a designer, as well as being a national best-selling author and the creator of the Coach Colby Writing Academy. Visit his website, coachcolby.me, for a free insider's cheat sheet on how to write effective op-eds. He has been an assignment editor.
And he is Craig Colby, who has spent 37 years in broadcasting. He's an award-winning executive producer and author and owner of Colby Vision, a video production and consulting company. Craig has been an assignment editor. But our guest today, Patrick Ho, has spent the better part of a decade as an assignment editor. He has worked at the Canadian Press, where he used to harass me for stories, and at the Toronto Star for more than 25 years. He is currently the deputy sports editor at the Toronto Star. Welcome, Patrick Ho.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I've really enjoyed a few of the episodes. I've really enjoyed listening to people talk about the media and try to educate them on what we do and how the sausage is made.
And here's the first bit of education.
Oh,
The reason we were introduced before you is because it's bros before hoes.
Oh, there we go. There we go. You must have.
I'm going to get in trouble for that one.
That.
Yeah, I saved that one for us going live. That wasn't in our rehearsal. So let's I know it's terrible.
I love your introduction in terms of assignment editors never make mistakes. That's certainly what we strive for. Certainly what we do every day.
Well, we're going to talk about what an assignment editor is and how hard the job is a little later. But this show came about from a friend of mine, John O'Gorman, who asked about how stories are made. We're also going to talk about the story that inspired him to complain to us. But let's go right into the question that people want to know. What makes a good story for the news?
I mean, it's got to be something that's out of the ordinary. Otherwise, it's not newsworthy. So. I mean, the old standard is, planes land at Pearson Airport all the time, but the one time it doesn't. Well, that makes it newsworthy. That makes it interesting. We run out there and try to talk to everybody involved. The usual man bites, the dog bites man. That happens all the time. Man bites dog. That's something out of the ordinary. So let's see what the story is behind that.
And here's the thing that inspired it. Why do news stories tend to skew negative?
That's interesting. It's just that I think it's just human nature that people. I think a lot of people just see the negative in things, and it's what's brought out. I mean, I think we try to counteract that by doing some other projects. Like, for instance, a few years back, we would do something called Random Acts of Kindness, where we focus on people just doing something every day, just doing something out of the goodness of the hearts. Whether they find a wallet on the subway car and go out of the way to try to track them down. I mean, that's the kind of good news story that attracts people as well. But skewing negative, it's just I think it's human nature. Scott, what do you think? You've done this job.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't make sense in a lot of ways that we want to read about the negative aspects of society, but that's the fact. I mean, we see it now with our data, right? We can now track stories, digital stories, and who's reading what. And the good news stories just are not well read. And I think because people want to know, like, news is when something, like you said, happens that's out of the ordinary. And usually it's like not something that's happy, right? Like plane crashes, wars, fires, earthquakes, disasters. I mean, you're in sports now. We can go back and forth between sports and news. Yeah. But I mean, obviously Homer's love to see their home team win, right? Those stories do really, really well, right?
Yeah.
I know after my teams lose, when Tigers lose 12-0, I don't want to read that article, right? But when they win 12-0, I want to read that article, right? So, I think that, and life stories and things like that, I think tend to be a little more, travel stories, right? You want to read about good experiences in travel.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with the news, I don't know. It's just like, I think you're right. It is human nature.
Yeah, the sports section is the place in the paper you go to read about accomplishment. And
Right.
I would say the science section can be like that too, having worked a lot in sports and science. We should also say that with news, what makes a good news story? I mean, it's in the word. There's 4 letters and 3 of them describe what is mostly news, and that is something that's new.
Yeah. And so, Patrick, when you started on the assignment desk at the Star, which is around the same time I started on the assignment desk at the Star, and you've worked an assignment at Canadian Press, but like, how difficult was it to choose which stories to assign to reporters?
For us on the assignment desk, it was mostly reaction to what was going on in the world. So out on the streets. So it wasn't that difficult. So I would say most of the time was us reacting to, whether it be crime or whether it's something happening at City Hall, or whether or not something like our public transit system isn't working, why isn't it working, that kind of stuff. So it's reaction. My favorite part of the job was actually shaping the part where, what interests me, and what I think, did I learn, what would I learn from like chasing this story. And my gauge for success always has been, if I learn something when I read your story, then it's a good story. And that's what I always try to think about when I'm assigning stories.
Right. And at times we often had more stories than we could assign, right?
Back in those days, we had the resources where we could actually choose what stories to use. And back then it was just a newspaper. So, a lot of stories didn't make it. So only the best could. Now with the resources that we have, everything, I think the pressure is on to make sure that every story that you had the idea of works out.
Right. Because you don't have the luxury of, assigning 10 stories and we're only going to run 10 or 5. I mean,
those were the old days. Yeah.
How many stories would you drop
back in those days?
Not run?
Not run. I think we were like, I'd say at least 3 or 4 a day. Remember, we used to hope for extra space at the end of the night from our desk, where we have 2 pages set aside for death notices. And sometimes they don't have enough death notices to fill the second page. And then we would use that extra space that we find at 9 o'clock to get those extra stories in. And if more people died than what normally would in other days, then we wouldn't be able to get those stories in. I'd
forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I remember there used to be real battles between the sections, right? Because we didn't really have the internet. So the only space we had was in print, and it was a finite amount of space, right? Yeah. And so we'd have stories, city, right? And we'd be city general assignment. City beats would have stories.
Yeah.
Foreign would have stories. National would have stories. Queen's Park would have stories.
Yeah.
And we'd all be fighting to get them into a very limited, still pretty big, like the section could be pretty big, but there were some real battles going on between the various sections on whose stories got to actually make it into print.
And I think the paper was better because of it, because there's so much competition to try to get on A1, to try to get your reporters on to get the most exposure. Yeah, those were good times.
Yeah. So what gets into A1?
I think to me it's the stories that would most interest the people, the most that could educate the people, and the ones that we think are important for people to know what's happening in the city, in Toronto or around the world.
There's a real tension there, right? I think we all know that. There's what you think people should know, and then there's what you think people will read or watch. So what usually wins?
I think it's a balance that you got to think of those of both factors. Is that you do want to make sure that you have the stories that people will read. I mean that's your bread and butter. But you also got to make sure that in that mix are stories that you think are important. And uh, I don't think you can just give people everything that they want, everything you think they want. I think part of our job is to let them know, hey, we think this is an important story. We think you should read it, and that's why we're giving it so much prominence.
Right. I think the key that is how it impacts their lives. Right. There's stories that are just generally interesting that may not impact your lives, like human interest stories. Right.
Yeah.
Like, wow, someone did something really incredible.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones like, this Air Canada strike, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Impacts a lot of, even if you aren't flying Air Canada, it impacts your life because it impacts other airlines and things like that. One of the questions that I have for you, Patrick, because assigning is as much an art as a science, right? The science, I would say, is just looking like the numbers, right? We have a pretty good idea what kind of stories people want to read, right? I think that's been pretty well established, and you learn that pretty quick in the news business. But the art of it is choosing the right story for the right reporter. How did you manage that hornet's nest of the job?
I think when you go in, like when you start the day, you know which reporters are the really strong writers and which reporters are very good at reporting, at getting all the sources. So it's a matter, you don't want to give the best stories to the same people all the time. Otherwise there'll be issues with it. But you also got to make sure you're right, it's a real dance in terms of trying to not to hurt people's egos, but on the other hand, making sure that the best writer does the top story of the day. And that's the thing, especially with an assignment editor, is that you want to make sure you deliver, and you deliver by having your best reporters doing the top stories. But however, you also want to give the other reporters a chance to do them as well. So it's a delicate dance every day. Every day is like that.
Yeah. When I was working the assignment desk, I would get calls from reporters. Why didn't I get to go do the Buffalo Bills story?
Exactly.
And then because I was doing it at TSN, and then you'd have to explain, well, usually it was a long chain of events. It's not you. It's not because we don't love you. It's not because you're not the best. It's just because of this and this and this.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember we used to have like Patrick said, there were some reporters who were writers. There are some reporters who were diggers, and there are some reporters who could do both, which was rare, right? The writing we could always fix, if we had time, right? We could always rewrite it. And back in the day, we had a rewrite desk, or we would just do it ourselves. The reporting, you can't really redo it from the office, So yeah, I remember that being a very, like, you'd look at our lineup of stories and you'd think, okay, this is a digger's job, because we've got to get the facts first, and then we can fix it up. Yeah. So I remember that being a real challenge. And another part of our job, of course, and we were fortunate in this to have this, is we worked with a lot of young journalists, right? We worked with a lot of interns. We had the radio room. So what was that like, mentoring these young reporters?
To me, that was the most fun part of the job, because they have so much enthusiasm, so much talent. I mean, most of them have more talent in the little finger than I do at all. But the one thing I do have is experience. And for me, with my experience, I can help shape their enthusiasm, like rein them in sometimes, or push them on in terms of what they're thinking about, and just seeing them just flourish. Like, for instance, for a summer reporter, so when they start off in May, pretty rough around the edges. By the time August rolls around, it's such a good feeling to see how much they've improved. And the sad part was to see how much they've improved, and a lot of times they just leave, because we could only keep so many people on after that, right? So yeah, it was, but it's so much fun, just so much enthusiasm with the people coming out of journalism school now.
Yeah, I found that. That was the exception. The exception is when they didn't come out and were super excited, right? Sometimes you found out early that people didn't really have the right personality for news, right?
Yes.
Because news is a different beast than features,
yeah.
Right? So yeah, news is pretty hardcore. Yeah. You find out early whether someone has the capacity to phone the home of where someone has died, where there's been a tragedy, right? And interview that family. Like that is a hell of a thing to ask a 22-year-old to do.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, I would never do something that I haven't done myself.
Right.
And I've done that. And it's hard. But I mean that I have a lot of admiration for reporters because they have to put themselves in very tough situations, and we're expected to act professionally at all times.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to throw in the story now that sort of led to us bringing Patrick on. I'm just going to add this.
Right.
I believe this is the exact story. And this was a friend of mine, John O'Gorman, who looked at this story. The focus of this, I believe it was this one. I know it's based on the same materials, where immigrants to Canada were saying that they wanted to go home because they were having such a bad experience here. I'm just going to read a little bit from the article. Said 8 in 10 newcomers have an overall positive experience. Over 40% of newcomers surveyed said they'd be likely to leave Canada if they were given the chance. The survey was conducted by a market research firm, Polara, in November using an online panel, 1,500 people. And that's sort of the base of it. It said Statistic Canada's latest analysis on out-migration shows more than 15% of immigrants leave the country within 20 years of arriving. And our friend John O'Gorman said he got the hook of the story. Boy, immigrants are leaving because Canada's inhospitable. And then when he looked at the data, 80% are happy here. 85% aren't leaving. Why does this story focus on the negative aspects of the minority that are leaving? Would you two gentlemen, we'll start with Patrick since he's our guest, sort of weigh in on this one?
I think it circles back to what you're asking about at the beginning of the show, which is why does news skew negative? And it's like, well, if your headline is 80% of newcomers are happy in Canada, nobody's going to read that story. That's but if you say what was it? What 40%? Sorry, 40% of newcomers are leaving. Then it's like, well, if you click on it, it's like, why are they leaving?
Well, 40% said that they, would consider leaving. Right.
Yeah,
that's not 40% leaving.
Okay.
And of those, a lot of them were from well-off countries like the United States or someplace like that.
Right. And I think the story also quotes somebody who said that they may consider leaving, but they don't actually end up leaving. And I guess my reaction to that would be, yeah, I mean, everybody has their bad days, and if you get asked a question like that, you want to just get up and go. But when push comes to shove, do you actually do it? No. Now, but the thing is, if you put that in the headline, 40% of newcomers will consider leaving, but most of them don't, then it's becomes where's the tension in that story then?
So is that even a story?
Exactly. I think it's something interesting to explore, but it's not something that would certainly grab my attention right away, because it's the same thing. It's like an elevator pitch, right? You need to get somebody's attention the first 5 seconds, and are they going to listen? Are they going to listen or read on from then? I think that's probably why you got to focus on the negative, just to get their attention before you educate them.
I think there's this perception that Canada is like this great country that attracts immigrants, right? And so I think what the nut of the story is that it's challenging that perception a little bit to say that 20 to 40% of people who come here actually aren't happy here. That's that. I mean, I agree that the story does, and like it's the treatment, right? The headline, the deck, and stuff kind of misses out on that context that overall it's still a positive story on immigration. It's how you want to frame it, right? Is 20% of the people leaving, is that a success or a failure, right? And I think it goes to our stereotype of Canada being, a successful place for immigrants to come.
So here's the question about that. I totally get it. The job of the headline isn't to give you all the information. The job of the headline is to get somebody to read the article or watch the story. When we do that, when we give them the headline, we get them to read it, we use the negativity, we use that angle. And people come away with the impression, like my friend Jono did, that, boy, the media is misleading me. Are we really doing our audience right with that type of headline for that type of story?
That's interesting. I think it's how can I put it? It's you draw the reader in by that headline, and certainly if you read the whole story, you come across you're more educated in terms of what the study shows. But to focus on one angle, I think you have to focus on one angle. Otherwise, why whether it be a negative angle, why would people read it? Is my thing.
Yeah, I certainly understand John's frustration, and not just because John's a lifelong Minnesota Vikings fan, but I also sense his frustration as a consumer of the news. And I think sometimes we fail readers by not putting the context in there. Like we have to assume our readers are intelligent and they can do the math and they can see that we've kind of twisted it around. It's like when we use percentages. You can say something like crime has doubled recently. Break-ins have doubled in this neighborhood. Well, they went from 1 to 2, right? Like you need that kind of context in the news. Otherwise, it does erode our credibility, for sure.
I guess, they've always done studies that show that readers don't read beyond the first few paragraphs of a story, right? It's important to get all that information up there in the first few paragraphs.
Yeah.
Can you cram all that context in the headline? I don't think so. But I think it's also incumbent on. I think we got to try to get people not to just read the headline. That we hopefully that we can encourage them to actually read the stories as well.
Right, you'll get the context you need if you can tough it out and actually finish, a story that takes a minute to read.
But here's the problem, though, right? With social media, it's all about the 25 word to get your attention.
Yeah,
that's what we're competing against. I guess that's what we offer, is that you can find out what people are saying on social media, but we can actually, if you actually read our stories, you can be more educated about what the reasoning is behind perhaps a statement that somebody made.
And that's where we dwell on a lot on this podcast, is the difference between what people get on social media, which people seem to like to trust more than the media. Although with the media, the jobs we've done our entire life, there is a whole set of checks and balances and expertise that has to be built up. Like when I joked at the beginning about the assignment editor being this mythical creature that can do all these things and can never make a mistake. Like I do that because that's a tough job. I remember I did assignment desk for not a long time. They wanted me to take it on full time and I didn't want to do it because it's really hard. No, when you get it right, nobody tells you get it right because you're supposed to. When you get it wrong, you hear about it because it's a disaster. It's just the toughest, most thankless gig there is, but it's also the engine that drives the news business.
I would argue
to be able to do that job, you have to really know your stuff.
Oh, I would also argue that it's also the most exciting job in the newsroom because you're starting fresh almost every day. I always say that, you could be one day in the corner office begging for your job because you really screwed up the night before. And the very next day, you could be working on an award-winning story. It changes very rapidly. And I love the adrenaline of that.
Do you have any highs and lows you remember in particular on the assignment desk in the news department, Patrick? One where he's like, yeah, we nailed it. And one where you're like, you had Mary D screaming at you the next morning.
Mary D was our managing editor. I'm not sure exactly about highs and lows, but I certainly have vivid memories. I remember one time when we got a call about a near miss at Pearson.
Yes.
And We got a call in about 11 o'clock, and like I think I saw it and I said, okay, we're gonna have to wait the next day because we're not gonna be able to nail down that story. And I think it was on the Globe and Mail front page the next day.
Yeah.
And then I come in at 3 o'clock, and I hadn't realized that the managing editor was yelling and screaming for my head because I hadn't jumped on the story. And it turns out that the Globe and Mail story was like completely wrong. And so anyway, I come in and it's like that whole cycle had happened, and people are coming up to me and say, "Boy, Patrick, it's good you didn't come in an hour ago because your job was on the line right there." So, but it's like highs and lows like that. But I think for me, it was what really shaped my time was like the crime, the stories that the city went through. Like, I remember when Holly Jones was killed, and Farrah Khan, and Celia Jang, like three young girls who were killed, and it was just heartbreaking for the city, and just to see the family members like just totally heartbroken. It was so sad, and something like that like sticks with you, right? Because it
I think people wonder. It seems kind of ghoulish that we report these things. What do you think the value is on reporting on these things, on going to people's homes and interviewing their family and asking for pictures of their deceased children? What do you think the value of that is?
It's funny you say that, because like I was thinking the same thing. Like for me, how I always justified it was that you want to let the public know that this is just not a name on the crime sheet, that there was somebody had was living a full life, and the life was just snuffed out. And you don't get that sense if you just see a name in the paper, or a name on the website. But if you see a face with it, it's like, oh, either I know this person, or oh my goodness, that person looks exactly like my son or daughter or something like that, right? And so like for me, that always justified like. If they didn't want it, if family members didn't want to talk, okay, you back off. But we often found that the grieving family members wanted somebody to talk to and wanted to share the grief. But what I find interesting now, however, is that there's so much interest in these true crime podcasts, which is seen as entertainment, and I think that, and I'm seeing cases that I was involved in on the assignment desk. I'm looking back and thinking, whoa, we're treating this like an entertainment story. And I remember like, talking with reporters, talking with who were talking with the families, and seeing how torn they were by what had happened. And now it's being shown for entertainment. And I'm just like, whoa, I'm not sure if I really reconcile myself to that. But I mean, but I would be hypocritical to and say that, I do enjoy true crime, but stuff that, that from other parts that I haven't been involved in, right? So
yeah, I find that these stories are part of public healing, right? I think that people who are empathetic, they feel the pain of these loss, even if they haven't even met this person. And I truly believe that by telling their story, showing their picture, I think it helps with communal grief and healing. And I think that's why it's important. And I agree with you that when it starts to commodify it and it becomes entertainment, it can be a little crass. It's nothing that I'm interested in.
But do you get that feeling as well, Scott? I mean, it's like
sometimes I do.
I've seen cases from back in the 90s. I'm seeing them on TV and or on podcasts, and it's like, whoa, wait a second, geez, I feel so conflicted watching those.
I can tell you about true crime in a bit, but the big thing that goes back to the pictures of the people who died. It goes back to the Emmett Till story in the United States. He was beaten and lynched horribly. And his mother insisted that the picture of him dead and beaten be published so people saw what it was. And everybody knew about lynching. Everybody heard about them. But when that picture was published, it changed the way people thought about it. And it gave a huge boost to the civil rights movement because nobody could ignore the emotion and the horror of what they saw in that picture.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of like I remember a few years back. I think we had a story about an NFL player assaulting their partner in an elevator.
Yeah, Ray Rice.
And then it was just a couple of lines in the story. But then when the video came out and people saw, people were absolutely outraged. But you're not as outraged when you just see a couple of lines on the website or in print.
Yeah.
We could talk forever about what makes a story, because I remember in my university journalism classes, you would study that for months. It takes years and years and years to develop the nose for that what that is. It's beyond the purview of this half an hour to 40-minute podcast to nail that down.
I think to me the rule was, does it interest me? And if it interests me, I think it would interest readers.
Yeah, that's always a good place to start, for sure. Yeah.
And also who's working in sports, who's involved. Something that happens to Sidney Crosby is more interesting than something that happens to your fourth line.
Well, okay, this is the thing. It's like we often get complaints from, let's say, relatives of somebody who participated in this competition somewhere in Canada or somewhere in the U.S. and represented Canada and did well, and a question like, why aren't you covering it? And it's like, well, it's great that your kid, your daughter, your granddaughter did great, but is anybody going to want to read it? I don't think so. In fact, if it wasn't for your granddaughter involved in it, I don't think you'd be reading it. So, it's like people want to read about the Jays, people want to read about the Leafs, people want to read about the Raptors, right?
Our assignment editor at TSN, Stu Nickel, at the time used to get phone calls from people in cottage country saying, "Well, we're having a water skiing competition up here at Lake whatever this weekend," and you go, "Wow, that's really interesting. You want to know what I'm doing this weekend?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Or I thought he'd say, how many people are at the water skiing competition and how many people are at a Jays or Raptors game,
Yeah. I mean, that shows public interest.
Yeah.
But
one thing, Patrick, that I think we both had to learn is sometimes there are stories that didn't interest either one of us, but we knew that it interested other people, right? We have to learn that lesson too, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Like this story is boring to me, but a huge segment of the population is really into this, so we got to assign it.
But I think you don't get the job like assignment editor unless you knew all the stories that would interest the public, right? Because it doesn't interest you. You know that there are enough people that are interested, and it's like I wouldn't have gotten the gig if you don't know what the touch points are.
Right.
What's the toughest part about being an assignment editor?
I think just trying to like when people are calling in asking why something isn't being covered, it's like why we're not writing a story on it. Is to try to be as diplomatic as possible to explain there's not as much interest in it, when really you're thinking in your mind, nobody cares except for you. So that's the reason why we're not covering it. But you need to be diplomatic about that, right? Mm-hmm. Having said that, I mean, just because there won't be widespread interest in the story, you might think, or the editors around you might think, there's got to be public interest in this story. We should give it a platform to give this person a chance to speak, and I think that's very important for a paper like Toronto Star to do.
Yeah. Scott?
I found that for me the hardest part was dealing with the reporters day in and day out. Right, you want to develop relationships with the reporters and hopefully have really strong relationships with them. And sometimes you got to give them stories that aren't very good. And by not very good, I mean it's not going to end up on the front page, right? But we got to do it. And I remember, I learned early just to be honest with them and come up and say, "I've got a story for you. You're not going to want to do. It's not going to get on the front page, but it needs to be done. So just do it to the best of your ability, and get it over with. Don't mail it in." Or sometimes I remember I gave Amy Dempsey a story once about the weather. We need a weather story. And I said, I want you to write the best weather story that the Toronto Star has ever published. And she came up with like a poem, and it was really well done. So sometimes you can challenge, you can't do that every time, but sometimes you can challenge them to maybe take a different approach to something that, that we need to do. Like there's certain stories that I hated assigning. I hated assigning weather stories, and I hated assigning streeters. That's where you go out and interview people on the street. I hated doing them as a reporter, and I was never a big fan of fire stories, like things that burn, because today most people get out, no one's dying, so what, something burned down, those are the kind of things that I didn't like having to assign. So I tried to just be honest with reporters that, this has been asked for. Let's just do the best we can and move on. And I'll try and get you something better tomorrow.
You could not have been an assignment editor in Tonawanda.
No.
It's easier to get them to do a story after they got an A1, right? So
yeah. It's like you in our relationships, Craig and I talked about this, and I wrote an article about coaching that appeared in the Star on Sunday. And you've got to make deposits before you can make withdrawals, right? Yeah. So when I remember when the new batch of reporters would show up, interns for the year long or something, we often didn't know anything about these people. We didn't hire them. And so it's like, okay, let's see what you're made of. Here's a tough story. Go out there and let's see what you can do. And we'll support you in any way we can. But sometimes you just got to throw people in the deep end and see how they respond. And if they respond well, you build that person up, and you give them more good stories. And then eventually you got to come to them and say, okay, we've given you a whole bunch of A1s. Now you got to write the weather story.
But and here's the thing, our job is just so full. It's so full of how to handle people. So one lesson I've always learned is that don't be afraid of praise. If somebody's done a good job, let them know. But don't just do a general, good job. Like specify, what exactly in the story was good. And then you had, so like you say, you build your credibility bank so that when something didn't happen right or something screwed up, you can go up to them and say, hey, you this could have been better, this could have been better, and they'll listen to you more because they know that that you actually care, that you actually you've built a credibility with them. So
you're on their side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How about you, Craig?
Well, the hardest part about the best part about the job was just being involved in all the stories. The hardest part about the job was I thought the thanklessness, that it just you could get it wrong, and you would hear about it, or you would get it right. And to Patrick's point, it is exciting to be in that, but being in television, the real excitement was in the control room when you were putting the show together or doing a live event. That's where I got the big rush. And it was, for me, that's the job I wanted to do, because at the end of the day, you made the show, and the show went out, and if the show was great, it felt great. If it didn't, sometimes I would get a call from our mom, Scott, the next morning. What the hell happened in your show last night? So but I just think when it comes right down to it, it is hard work. And it can be thankless hard work, but it's the stuff that drives the engine of the things that people see. And now is the time, we're getting near the end of the show. Now is the time in the show where Patrick, Scott, and I promote our books. So
you go
Scott's
first.
looking for someone to talk first. My new book, The Unqualified Hockey Coach, is now out. You can get it on Amazon. We're recording this in August. It's going to air in September. It's just been out for a few days, but already people are ordering it. It is 7 short stories that all have to do with how people can make a difference in other people's lives.
And you can read my review of it on Amazon.
Yes, Scott gave me an excellent review. And
everyone
Scott,
should buy it.
Although my brother, Scott, prides himself on telling the truth as a journalist, as he should.
Yeah. This is my latest book. If you want to learn how to become a better writer, this will teach you how to become a better writer. Even if you're not interested in just writing op-eds. So that's what you think. And that's what I think.
And that's memoirs.
Many books on your resume, I think. Your PK, your Subban.
Yeah, I got my Subban book, and I got a collection of short stories that are odd. But that one is called, I've changed the name of it. I don't even want to call it anymore.
It's called Death in Etobicoke.
Death in Etobicoke. It's in my mind.
Right here.
That book is only for people of high intelligence. So you can be your own judge of whether you are smart enough and intelligent enough to read that book.
I'll make sure I get that right away. I feel like I've got nothing to plug. I feel so unaccomplished. You guys have done so much.
You got to write something, and then we'll have you back. And of course, there's all caps, my multiple award-winning book. Listen, that's it.
Thank you, Patrick, for joining us and sharing your insights.
This was a lot of fun. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, thank you.
All right, thanks. And if you have listeners, if you have any ideas for shows like this one, let us know, and we will make sense of media for you. Scott, Patrick, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.